Hello and welcome. Today I am going over biblical prophecy, specifically the prophecy of Daniel, chapter 11. In this chapter Daniel is told about the beginning of the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires and the diplomatic relations between them. So, what exactly was Daniel told about? Well, the prophecy begins with Xerxes I, the fourth Persian king after Cyrus, and his war against Greece. Daniel also prophesied the king of Greece, Alexander the Great, and how his empire would be uprooted and divided. One of the generals who took control over a part of Alexander's empire was Ptolemy I, who ruled Egypt. Seleucus I, another ruler, would flee his own kingdom and become a commander under Ptolemy. Seleucus would retake his kingdom and expand his province into an even larger empire than Ptolemy's and call it the Seleucid Empire. The son of Ptolemy I, Ptolemy II, would make a peace treaty with Antiochus II, the king of the Seleucid Empire. The peace treaty required Antiochus II to marry Berenice, Ptolemy II's daughter, so Antiochus had to divorce his wife at the time, Laodice. Laodice would poison the new wife of Antiochus, Berenice, as well as her infant son, and later Antiochus would also die of poisoning, fulfilling the prophecies of Daniel 11:6. The brother of Berenice, Ptolemy III, would launch a war against the Seleucid Empire to avenge his sister, and was successful and able to return with many spoils of war, though he could not complete his campaign due to an uprising. Seleucus II Callinicus would attempt to enter into Egypt when Ptolemy III was returning but failed and had to retreat, but his sons would prepare for war, and one of them, Antiochus III the Great, would launch an attack against Egypt and sweep through all the way to the city of Raphia. While Antiochus had gathered a larger army, Ptolemy IV, the new king of the Ptolemaic Empire, was able to repel and defeat Antiochus, with his army slaughtering thousands of the Seleucid troops. However, Antiochus, many years later, invaded the Ptolemaic Empire with fully heavily armored cavalry called cataphracts, so a fully equipped army. Ptolemy IV would be replaced by Ptolemy V, who was only a child, so Antiochus III and the king of Macedon would agree to invade and split the Ptolemaic Empire among them. Many Jews would help the Seleucid Empire invade the Ptolemaic Empire to attempt to gain independence, but instead Israel would become controlled by the Seleucid Empire instead. The general of the Ptolemaic Empire would surrender, and Antiochus would force Ptolemy V to marry his daughter so he could have political power over the Ptolemaic Empire. However, his daughter, Cleopatra I, would side with Ptolemy over her father. Antiochus would later set out westward to capture coastland cities in the Aegean. However, a Roman commander, named Scipio Asiaticus, would defeat Antiochus and put a stop to his conquest, and force him to pay reparations and give Rome 20 hostages, including his second oldest son. Antiochus would then return to his own land but die the next year. Seleucus IV would succeed his father and force heavy taxes on the Israelites. He would send Heliodorus to collect taxes from the Jewish temple. However, Heliodorus would be expelled from the temple by angels according to tradition. Seleucus IV would later be poisoned by Heliodorus, and Heliodorus would take the throne, co-ruling with Antiochus the son of Seleucus, who was only a child or possibly infant. The person who succeeded Heliodorus and Seleucus was Antiochus IV Epiphanes, brother to Seleucus, who was a hostage to the Romans but later freed and replaced with the son of Seleucus. Antiochus Epiphanes persuaded the Syrian nobles to help him overthrow Heliodorus and proclaimed he would co-rule with his child brother, Antiochus. However, Antiochus would die, and Antiochus Epiphanes would become the sole ruler of the Seleucid Empire. Antiochus Epiphanes would kill Onias III, the high priest for the Jews, and replace him. Antiochus Epiphanes would crush revolting Jews believing him to be dead, and randomly distributed wealth to the public citizens of his empire. He would also plot against the Ptolemaic Empire. Antiochus Epiphanes would war with the Ptolemaic Empire, with great success, and those within the Ptolemaic Empire would also plot against the king, Ptolemy Philometor. Ptolemy would be overthrown and would have conferences with Antiochus Epiphanes, with both lying and trying to gain advantage over the other. Antiochus would return from Egypt with spoils of war and slaughter many faithful Israelites and profane the Jewish temple after hearing of how they rejoiced after the false report of his death. Antiochus IV Epiphanes would yet again invade the Ptolemaic Empire, but he would be opposed by ambassadors sent to Egypt by Rome, who did not want Antiochus invading it again. Antiochus was forced to leave Egypt in order to keep peace with Rome, and on his way back to his land he would once again attack Jerusalem while rival Jewish groups were fighting. Antiochus Epiphanes would once again kill and enslave many faithful Jews and prohibit them from following their laws and ceremonies. He would also set up the abomination of desolation, a pagan altar, in the Jewish temple. Many Jews would be persecuted, but they would receive help from the Maccabees, a group of Jews who rose up and defied Antiochus Epiphanes. Eventually they would be able to successfully rebel and gain independence from the Seleucid Empire. Due to the Maccabees now controlling the land, many Jews who were not truthfully faithful joined them and acted faithful but were not sincere. It is also possible these verses refer to the rise of Christianity, when Christians were being persecuted, but would gain help from Emperor Constantine, who ended persecuted and became a Christian himself. Because of this, many people insincerely converted to Christianity. While the rise of Christianity could be prophesied, it's more likely the Maccabean revolt was what was prophesied, since it was directly after Antiochus Epiphanes' persecution of the Jews, while the rise of Christianity was over a century later. Now when it comes to verses 36 to 45, Christians and atheists dispute whether this king of the north is still Antiochus Epiphanes or a future king. Atheists believe the book of Daniel was written in the 2nd century BC and that the author of the book was incorrectly predicting what Antiochus Epiphanes would do in the final verses, whereas Christians believe the final king of the north is the future Antichrist, and Antiochus Epiphanes foreshadowed him. It is debatable ultimately as to whether Antiochus fulfilled the verses of 36 to 39, but he did not fulfill the verses of 40 to 45. Antiochus did not control the Libyans or the Cushites, though some may argue the Ptolemaic did control part of Cush and Libya and he took treasures from the Ptolemaic empires. Antiochus Epiphanes did not invade Egypt again after his persecutions of the Jews, however, and he did not die in Jerusalem as the text possibly indicates. However, because it is said the final king of the north would invade Israel and Antiochus Epiphanes already controlled Israel, it is very questionable as to Antiochus Epiphanes being the king of north referred to in these verses. If the final king of the north is the Antichrist, then the Antichrist will exalt himself above every god, besides the one he serves, blasphemy against God, attack fortresses with the help of this false god, greatly honor those who acknowledge him and distribute land for money. Some suggest that this king is not actually the king of the north, but that the king of the north and south will both attack him. Whichever the case, he will successfully invade Egypt and take wealth from Libya and Cush, which is now modern Sudan and possibly Ethiopia. The Antichrist will also set up tents in what is now the Palestine West Bank. It's possible this means this is where the Antichrist will set up his capital and also where he will die. That is the end of the video. Have a good day. Don't sue me and goodbye.